Okay, much better. So, and without further ado, I'm going to
Say it again.
oh, I have to say it all.
I think so, yeah.
Well, anyway, welcome back to the Florence Nightingale Museum. Like I said earlier, this program is being done in conjunction with our newest temporary exhibition. It's all about Kofoworola Pratt. And I'm not going to go into detail about her story, but basically, the In Focus series really is just designed to shed light on underrepresented stories that have a connection to Florence Nightingale and that legacy, but are important stories to tell in their own right. So I'm really excited to get started talking about it. I'm also welcoming Kandace. She is a wonderful author who we've had the privilege of working with quite a few times before, so we're glad to have her back with us. She is the author of the Our Story New Black History series. They include books like The Windrush, A Story of Afro Hair, and our personal favorite, The Story of Britain's Black Nurses. And actually, I'm happy to say that the Florence Nightingale Museum actually has a few copies that are signed available. So if you act relatively quickly, you could have a signed copy of that book. They're available for purchase online or in person if you're in the area. Kandace has lived both in London and in Barbados, and she's really passionate about teaching Black history both to children and adults. And I happen to know she's a lovely and wonderful person and a very talented public speaker. So I'm really excited to have her speaking with us all today. So I'm going to turn over to her really soon. And she has some brief housekeeping things that she wants to talk about first, and I'll be nearby just in case there's any technical issues. So, Kandace, I'm going to turn over to you.
Oh, thank you, Melissa. And I just want to say a huge, huge thank you to everyone who's joining this call. I really appreciate it. I don't know where everyone is. Maybe you can put in the chat where you are dialing in from. But I know here in the UK, we've been having some nice weather. So it's really nice that you're taking the time to join me for this talk. I'd also like to thank Melissa and the Florence Nightingale Museum for having me here today to talk about the life of Kofoworola Abeni Pratt. Now, first of all, I have to say I am not Nigerian. Please, if there are any Nigerians, do bear with my pronunciation, and you can make comments and suggestions on how to improve it. So where are people calling in from? We know we have some people joining us from France. We know we have people joining, obviously, from here in London. I can see someone from Vauxhall. I think we have some people also dialing from the USA
I think so,
as
yes.
well. Birmingham, Savannah, Georgia, USA, Yorkshire Dales. Thank you. Thank you. Everyone is welcome. Thank you so much. I'm going to talk to you for about 15-20 minutes. If you do have questions, please put them in the chat. Melissa and I will be going through the questions at the end and trying to answer your questions to the best of our ability. So, who am I? Some of you already know me. Some of you will obviously be meeting me here for the first time. So, my name is Kandace, and I am a children's author. I've been writing and publishing, or being published, books for children about Black history since 2009. I actually started as a self-published author. I was at the time very, very disappointed with the range of books that were on offer to children about Black history. I felt the topics were too restrictive. We just covered mostly enslavement, sometimes African American history. I wasn't seeing a broad enough range. So I started to self-publish, and then I did that with quite good support, but obviously self-publishing is very difficult, particularly when you have another job. It's difficult to do everything yourself. And in 2020, I did decide it was time to perhaps try the traditional route. And one of my books, The Story of the Windrush, which was very well supported as a self-published book, this was part of a 5-book deal I got, and this was republished by Scholastic. So the series that Melissa mentioned at the beginning was part of a 5-book deal, a republished version of the story of the Windrush, which actually also ties into nursing history, the story of Afro hair, 5,000 years of history, fashion, and styles. So this is ancient, medieval, and modern Black history being told through popular and perhaps a few unpopular Afro hairstyles. And my most recent book in the series, The Story of Britain's Black Nurses, which is how I would say I came to the attention of the Florence Nightingale Museum. And so for me, it's a real honor that they've asked me to come back and to speak a bit more about the life of Kofoworola Abeni Pratt, more than the African Florence Nightingale. So I'm going to refer to my notes. I don't usually do that, but because her life was so full of achievement and I don't want to miss anything, I will be looking down quite frequently to make sure I get in all the points about her life. I'm going to talk a little bit about why she matters, why I think this is a very important life to know about for nursing history, for Black history, and for women's history. And when I wrote this book, The Story of Britain's Black Nurses, this was actually the most challenging book that I've ever had to write. I didn't realize how under-researched and under-recorded and underappreciated women's history was and nursing history, because although there have always been men in nursing, nursing has and still is predominantly a female profession. So we do need to bear that in mind and bear that in mind when we talk about the achievements and the struggles and the successes of people like the lady we're going to talk about this evening. So Kofoworola Abeni Pratt was born in Lagos in Nigeria in 1915. Some sources say 1914, but most say 1915. Now, her father actually had a tie or was connected to Sierra Leone. So there is a connection there. And he worked for a private company rather than the civil service, which was the main employer of middle-class people at that time. Her family had converted to Christianity. She had a very comfortable upbringing, and she was brought up in the Anglican Church. She attended the Church Missionary Society Anglican Girls Seminary School in Lagos. She completed her primary education there, but also, which was much harder for girls at that time, she also completed her secondary education. And that's where she took her Cambridge Senior School Certificate in 1933. Now, as well as being academic, she was also a patrol leader in the Girl Guides. She was captain of a netball team, and she was also captain of a house at school, one of the school houses. After she finished her schooling, she did a year diploma, a teacher's diploma, and that was in 1935 at the United Missionary College for female teacher training in Ibadan. In case my pronunciation is not understood by Nigerians, I am talking about the city that is the capital of Oyo State, so Ibadan. Hope I've pronounced it correctly. She returned after that to her old school and she taught history at her old school. Now, obviously, this was colonial times. So when she was teaching history, obviously this meant British history. Her biographer, Justice Akinsanya, says that she taught English history and the history of the British Empire. So she wasn't teaching Nigerian history. She taught for about 5 years. And then in 1940, she left teaching to get married to Olu Pratt, who was a trainee pharmacist that she had met at the school prize giving. They were married in January 1941, and as part of his job as a pharmacist, they had to travel quite extensively throughout Nigeria. She had a son who unfortunately passed away. Her second son, Babatunde, was born in 1943. Now, Olu had decided to become a doctor, and the family decided that he would come to Britain to study medicine. And it seems that it was around that time that Kofoworola decided to become a nurse. Partly, it would seem, because it would help to complement what her husband had chosen. He would become a GP and she would be a nurse. So her family life was always very important to her as well. Now, this is where one of the first comparisons to her being like Florence Nightingale comes in, because although Olu was supportive of her becoming a nurse, her father was not. And apparently, according to her biographer, he was extremely angry when he heard of her decision or her wish to become a nurse. So, like Florence Nightingale, she had to overcome parental objections. She decided that she wanted to study at the Nightingale Training School at St. Thomas Hospital. And here is where it's a bit interesting in the story, because unusually she was offered a place before she came, not through the Colonial Office, but through Olu, who had come to Britain. He had come to study medicine. And she wrote to him and asked him to find out a bit more about the Nightingale Training School. Having heard about it, obviously it was famous because of Florence Nightingale. And according to the story, Olu made an appointment and came and saw the matron at the Nightingale Training School, who was so charmed and impressed with him that he offered a place to Kofoworola. She offered a place to Kofoworola, subject to her completing the application forms, which she then gave to him. He sent them to her in Nigeria to complete, but she was actually offered a place. And this was very, very unusual because, as I said, the usual process was to go to the Colonial Office, apply there, and then when the student came to Britain, they had to report to the Colonial Office in London. This was obviously colonial times. Another thing that's a little unusual, we're not sure how this happened. As I said, at this time, Kofoworola was married. Now, there was a marriage bar. Women were required to give up their jobs and their careers when they got married. And this was obviously the expectation of society at the time, that they would stay home, look after the home, look after the house, and look after any children. The marriage bar was relaxed during the Second World War, as we all know. However, the Nightingale Training School continued the marriage bar until 1962. So it's not clear why she was allowed to train while others had to give up their career or their desire to nurse on marriage. In any case, she came to Britain in August 1946 with her son Babatunde, who was then around 3 years old, to begin her training at St. Thomas's Hospital. She attended the preliminary training school, which was in Surrey, and Babatunde was looked after by a foster parent nearby. And that was quite a common practice, fostering amongst Nigerian families. In 1949, she sat her exams and she became a state registered nurse. And then over the next 4 years, she did further studies, further training, and further qualifications. She trained in midwifery at the Anglican Sisters of St. John Clinic in Deptford, gaining her midwifery certificate in 1950. She also did a course at the Hospital for Tropical Medicine in St. Pancras, which was then part of the University College Hospital. And she gained her tropical nursing certificate in 1951. In 1952, she completed the ward sister course at the Royal College of Nursing, and that was with a grant that she got from the Nightingale Fund. After her ward sister course, she became a staff nurse at Evelina Children's Hospital, but not where it is now, next to us here. At that time, it was part of Guy's Hospital. And in 1953, she returned to St. Thomas Hospital as a part-time charge nurse. And during this time, she also gave birth to her third child, her second surviving son, Olufemi. During this time, she did experience, as we could expect, curiosity, ignorance, and anti-Black racism. One example, which was recorded by her biographer, was that one student, quote, whose parents were English but lived in Kenya, often wondered aloud about Mrs. Pratt's abilities. She wanted to know, for instance, where she learnt to speak and write in English because she found it incompatible with her own experiences of girls in Kenya. The quality and the quantity of her wardrobe was also another source of curiosity to some of her colleagues, fellow students. And she did experience racism from patients. One occasion was of a patient who objected to being bathed by a Black nurse. In 1954, she returned to Nigeria. She became a medical ward sister at Adebayo Hospital in Ibadan. Standards at the time were poor. As I explain in my book, this was very, very common throughout the empire. Senior nursing roles were filled by white British nurses, and the lower ranks were filled by local nurses. However, she set about raising the standards of patient care and making changes. And over the next 10 years, between 1954 and 1964, she rose through the ranks. In 1955, she was promoted to administrative sister. In 1956, she came back to the UK to take a course in nursing administration at the Royal College of London. In 1959, with a Carnegie grant, she travelled to the USA, Puerto Rico, and Jamaica. 1961, shortly after Nigeria gained independence in 1960, she became deputy matron at the University College Hospital, Ibadan. In 1964, she then became matron of that hospital, the first Nigerian to do so. And in 1965, she was appointed the chief nursing officer. By this time, Nigeria had become a federal republic, and she was now responsible for nursing matters in all Nigeria. And in the 1970s, she also was appointed Commissioner of Health for Lagos State, where she brought in reforms, not just for nurses, but also having responsibility for doctors and public health as well. She did much to improve the status of nurses, both in Nigeria and internationally. I won't list everything, but a few highlights of her achievements. In 1956, she co-founded the Professional Association of Trained Nurses in Nigeria. In 1957, she led the first Nigerian delegation to the International Council of Nurses Congress in Rome. And in the 1960s and 70s, for about 10 years, she was a member of the Expert Advisory Panel on Nursing for the World Health Organization. At the end of the 60s, in 1968, she co-founded Nigerian Nurse, a professional nursing journal. She received a number of national and international awards, including in 1973, the Florence Nightingale Medal. And in 1975, she was awarded a chieftaincy title for her services to Nigeria. Kofoworola Abeni Pratt passed away in June 1992. Her life, as I said, was one that adds to our understanding of nursing history. It adds to our understanding of Black history. It adds to our understanding of women's history. And for me, one of the reasons why I'm very passionate about telling these stories and telling these history is not just because we want to celebrate and recognize people's achievements, although that's very important. It's also about what we do about those achievements, what we do with the learning that we get and the inspiration we get from these lives. And one of her legacies, which for me is one of the most important, is that in 2021, Guy's and St Thomas's NHS Foundation Trust launched the Kofoworola Abeni Pratt Fellowship. And this fellowship is the first anti-racism fellowship in the NHS. And it was created in recognition of the inequalities and lack of senior leaders who identify as being from the global majority. There have been 3 cohorts so far, totaling 11 people, who are all experienced nurses, midwives, or allied health professionals. And the next cohort will start this year, 2025. And for me, this is why we should recognize these histories and these stories, pass them on, use them as inspiration, but also use them to take action, whatever action we can, to address some of those inequalities in the past. And for me, that's one of the reasons why her legacy, Kofoworola Abeni Pratt's legacy, is about more than being an African Florence Nightingale. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kandace. That was wonderful. I think everyone probably agrees with me. She is just such a fascinating person in general, and she really accomplished so much. And actually, I just saw behind us, if you would like to see, this is a blown up version of the Nightingale Medal, which she would have received as one of the graduating Nightingale nurses from the training school. I think we have some time for some questions. So if anybody does have any questions for Kandace, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we can read them. I guess I'll start with just a quick one. Something that I'm always fascinated with is how did you decide to study Black nurses and actually do that research that you needed to fill a book with these stories?
So actually, this particular book wasn't my idea. It was actually my publisher who suggested that one. So whereas some of the other books I've written, they were about ideas that I hadn't actually thought about nursing. It was my publishers who suggested it. And when they said, would you like to do a book about Black nurses? I thought, absolutely, of course. Now, my mother wasn't a nurse, but a couple of my aunts who came in the 60s, part of what we call the Windrush generation, they did do nursing. And one of the things I have had to think about myself was, why didn't I think about that? Why wasn't that one of the books that I thought about writing? And when I've been writing this book, and obviously we all appreciate nurses, we know we do, but I do think that sometimes we take nurses for granted as well. And I have thought to myself, have I also been guilty of just taking nurses and for granted? It seems as though it's only when there's a war or a crisis like a pandemic, that we really appreciate them. And then after, they tend to get forgotten. So I wish I could say to you that, oh, yes, I thought about this idea for this book, but that wouldn't be true. But I have to say, from doing the research in this book, it's made me much, much more determined that we appreciate nursing and nurses all the time, not just when we need them. So, yeah.
That's a great response for that, really. I see that some people are adding some questions.
Oh, yes,
So
I'll take this one. Yeah.
yes,
So, what are the details of her biography, title, and author, and is it available? Right. So, her biographer, who in himself is someone very interesting. I didn't include him in my book, but he's also someone very much worth looking into and knowing more about. A male nurse. His name was Justus, Justus, Akinsanya. Akinsanya. I probably pronounced it not so correctly. The book is called An African Florence Nightingale, a biography of Kofoworola A. Pratt. And it was published in 1987. It was published in Nigeria, and the publisher has since gone out of business. I do know, I don't have a copy myself. I know they have a copy here at the museum on display, a signed
it's a signed
copy.
copy by her.
They have two copies in the Royal College of Nursing Library, because I did see that when I was doing the research for my book. I have seen it online, a
Yes.
PDF
So
online.
we do have a PDF version available on the Florence Nightingale website. It's with a little section all about our info focus exhibition. So it's a PDF version that you can click on and read it if that's it has gone out of print though. So it's a difficult one to get your hands on. But yes, we do have a digital version available there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yes, and Justus knew her. He also lived in the UK sometime. And like I said, he's also quite interesting. You can find a little bit about him on the internet, not enough. But he actually knew her personally, and he spoke to her and the family when he wrote the biography. It's a very entertaining read. The way it's written, it's quite interesting to read it. So, yeah. I see another question here. Did your book look at Mary Seacole? Absolutely. Of course, it did look at Mary Seacole. And I also mentioned a little bit about the legacy of Mary Seacole, but also a little bit about the tradition that she came from. Because although it's really good that we recognize Mary Seacole, and obviously, she is 100 years, about 100 years, 800 years before Abeni Pratt, and her achievement obviously was huge as well. But I think it's also important to remember that she was also a part of a legacy. And there are, for example, I talk a little bit about her mother and that the whole culture or the practice at the time, which Mary Seacole was one part of. And we know about Mary Seacole because obviously she came to Britain and took part in the Crimean War, as did Florence Nightingale. But she was actually part of a tradition that was happening in Jamaica at that time, and almost certainly other parts of the Caribbean as well. So, yes, the book does mention Mary Seacole as well. Let's see, do you know where she went and what she did when she traveled to the USA? I do know, and I have forgotten. I think it was a year. Was it? I can't remember if it was a year of training or no. It wasn't training. I think it was to go, and she definitely was learning more about nursing. And she went to the USA, Jamaica, and Puerto Rico. But I must be honest, I haven't, I don't have all the details about that. Did her sons return with her to Nigeria? Yes, they did. Question.
Yeah, that's most of them.
Okay.
If you have any more questions, feel free to add them. I'm gonna take a second to plug the museum. If you are in the area, we do really recommend you coming by and seeing the exhibition. It's up until June, and it really is just a wonderful story. And while Kandace did an amazing job of summarizing everything up, there is honestly enough information about her that it could fill multiple books. She truly just accomplished a huge amount. So I do recommend stopping by and seeing at least a small section of the museum and of her story that we're able to share with everyone. And we're really excited to be sharing it and also working with the Pratt Fellowship. They've been amazing and very supportive of the project as well.
And it's actually just your second In Focus exhibition,
Yes.
which I think is
Yes,
good.
it's only our second one, so we're learning and going up as well. And also, if anyone has any nursing stories that they're interested in us potentially covering in the future, feel free to send us an email because we are always looking for what people want to hear about and what stories that they think need more investigation and more spotlights on. So, oh, we have another question.
How do you think she coped with being one of the few women in a time when it was unusual to have women in government? That's a very good question. And I must be honest, I haven't looked into that aspect enough. But it was obviously much more unusual as a woman. And also because it was colonial times, I know that as well as being a woman and a Nigerian woman, black woman at this time when they were just going obviously into the independence period. And I know that there were a few also events or incidents which are also mentioned in the biography as well, because there were different expectations. When the colonial servants came out, from Britain, they obviously got better accommodation. For example, I know there was one occasion where when she did get a role, she was given the accommodation for the natives, which was lower than what would have been given to the colonials coming out, the expats coming out from Britain. So yeah, there's definitely some more there. Yeah. Are you planning to do any further presentations on Black nurses? Well, at the moment, no, I haven't got any more planned.
Well, we always would love to have Kandace back, but yes, Kandace is actually very active on social media, so I highly recommend you all, if you have not done so already, follow her on Facebook or LinkedIn is also a very big one.
Yeah. And I've obviously got my website, but I will definitely put the details on my website of talks that I have coming up. My website is kandacechimbiri.com, so very easy. And I am on Instagram, as Melissa says. So I think, hopefully there will be more. This is not something that I am doing just to do now and then be finished with it. It's something that I would like to see. And even not just me, I would like to see, and that's why I'm really pleased that you did this exhibition and why I jumped at the chance to give this talk, because I think there is so much more that we need to do to make these stories better known, to recognize these achievements, and also to build on this legacy. When I wrote the book, The Story of Britain's Black Nurses, I had to take into account that it's not just about nurses who were here in Britain. Britain was an empire. There are all these countries in Africa and the Caribbean and Canada that were part of the British Empire. We should have thousands of stories of these nurses. So I hope I will get the opportunity to do more. And as I said, we will be circulating this recording. We're going to put some images into it as well. And we would love it if you would, when you get the link, circulate to other people as well. Please circulate it to teachers. There is also a free downloadable teaching resource to accompany this book on my website. So that can be used by teachers all over the world so that we can recognize more of these stories and just appreciate these contributions, really.
I think that sums it up perfectly. I think that's everybody. If there's no more questions, we will be signing out for the night. But thank you again so much for joining us. From reading the comments, everybody's from all over the world, so it's great to get this sort of representation, and it's great to get this story out to so many other people. So thank you again so much for attending. And if you're interested in future Zoom events, you can subscribe to our newsletter as well. We're planning on doing a Zoom event with every new exhibition. So thank you so much, Kandace, for coming. As always, she's absolutely wonderful. And we will be sending you the link soon. So I'm going to stop recording now. And if anybody has any questions in the future, just send us an email and I will get them to Kandace, and I'm sure she can answer them. Have a nice night, everybody.
Thank you.